The presentation is over. You've gone home. You go sit on the sofa. Your body doesn't feel very well. It wants to kind of scrunch inward. You want to hold yourself. The chest might feel a little heavy. There's a warmth that starts spreading through your whole torso, and it's not because of the temperature in the room. And that voice, that mind that has already started the debrief. You didn't do a good job. Why didn't you prepare more? Your ideas were unclear. People could tell you didn't know what you were talking about. So the presentation ended an hour ago, and you're the only one still in it. That voice has a name. It's called the inner critic. And almost everyone who's cared about something has heard it. I'm Victoria Fontana, and this is No User Manual, a podcast for life without instructions. By the end of this episode, you will have a way to stand outside of that voice instead of being hijacked by it or swallowed up by it. And so where does this voice come from? Why does the mind do this? Well, this part of us, this inner critic, it's not a flaw. It's not something wrong with us. It's really simply a protection system. And that voice is really coming from a very deep and outdated, perhaps, belief about what will happen if we're not enough or if we don't do a good enough job. It's running all of these threat assessments in real time and before your mind even has a chance to catch up and even hear it. So you'll find yourself in the middle of a meeting or in the middle of something and your nervous system has detected the threat. We're going to be in trouble. We're not going to feel safe. And before you've even done anything, made any decision, taken any action, your body has already picked its lane, and the lane is fight or flight or freeze. And not only that, but we can start to criticize ourselves for that. Look at, I can't give a presentation, or I'll never speak up in meetings, or I don't have anything to bring into this, or when will they find me out that I'm not good enough? And it's not a weakness. It's really this part of our body and mind doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's a protection system. And once it goes into that physical or visceral response, that means the mind and the body are believing that we are in pain. In fact, a researcher named Naomi Eisenberger put people in a brain scanner and showed that when we experience social rejection, our brain activates the same regions as when we feel physical pain. So the inner critic's fear of being found out or of being rejected or cast out, it doesn't feel like pain because it's overreacting or it's being dramatic. It feels like pain because to the brain, it is pain. And so what shows up as a behavior on the surface, not saying something in a meeting or procrastinating on an important job application or monitoring everything you say based on controlling someone's perception of you, it's not that there's something wrong with us. The behaviors are a symptom to something that is really running deeply under the surface, this belief. And that's what's really worth exploring and identifying. And then even when we identify that, when we recognize that belief, or we recognize the thoughts that the inner critic is showing us or bringing in, there's still even a gap sometimes between making it shift or working with it or softening it. A psychologist named Paul Gilbert spent years studying people who actually understood intellectually what their inner critic was doing, but still couldn't be kind to themselves, still couldn't soften towards themselves. So what he found was that shame-based self-criticism and compassionate self-correction actually activate different systems in the body. So one keeps that threat alarm running and the other one turns it off. There's a lot of costs to this critic when our behaviors are driven by these fears or these beliefs that aren't based in reality. It's like wearing a heavy cloak our whole lives. This inner critic is doing its best to protect us from shame, from rejection, from looking bad, or any pain related to being found out or anything that might make us feel ashamed of ourselves. And by doing that, it's really keeping us small. It might show up in different ways, like not saying yes to the next presentation because you felt so much irritation or pain in that first presentation when the critic went off. Or it shows up by people pleasing or saying yes when you meant to say no, not setting boundaries, or maybe procrastination that we throw on ourselves as laziness, but actually we're just skillfully avoiding any discomfort. And then it can also show up as lashing out or blaming others. So there's many different ways it kind of controls our behaviors or guides our behaviors. But essentially, it really keeps us from discovering the one most important thing that it needs to learn. And that is that actually, no matter how embarrassed I could feel, no matter how much I flub up a presentation or say the wrong thing in a meeting, I'm actually safe. I can handle it. It's not the end of the world, and I can show up for myself. It never really gets that evidence or that news flash because it keeps engineering or creating the conditions that prevent us from ever feeling any of that embarrassment or shame. So the question here is, what can we do with that voice? Our instinct often, or my instinct at least, has been, I just want it to go away. I don't want to hear this voice anymore. Stop. But it's not really about silencing that inner voice or that critic. It's really about what becomes possible when you open to it or turn towards it and actually befriend that voice, which is quite counterintuitive. And what I'm talking about here is self-compassion. And I know if I say that word, it might sound like you're letting yourself off the hook, but it's not that really. Self-compassion is not the same as self-indulgence. It's not saying that every concern the critic has is invalid. If you didn't prepare enough for a meeting or for a presentation, and then that's true, and then it might be a good point to pay attention to and learn from. But that same critic often spends then another hour or so telling you what an imposter you are and how everybody knows it and you're not going to be good enough and all those messages. And that really stops being useful or helpful. It actually becomes quite destructive. And so we're not dismissing the voice. You're really deciding which part, or discerning which part of the information is valid and worthy of listening to and learning from, and which part is that harsh noise that is not serving you. And sometimes it feels like when we turn towards that voice, and this might have happened to you, you might be thinking, oh, well, I've tried that, and it actually is getting louder. And yeah, that does happen when you stop fighting something that you've been pushing away for years. The voice might get louder before it gets quieter. And it's not really you failing at this. It's really about this is actually working because there's a part of you that's been trying to be heard. It's been nagging for your attention. And for a long time, it's been dismissed, right? And so it might get louder or feel louder because you're really putting it into your awareness. And that opening to it and practicing bringing it into your awareness is what actually helps, part of what helps it shift. It's really a rehearsal. And actually, this is really well supported in neuroscience research that tells us that the brain is not fixed. Repeated practice, making the same conversation over and over again with that scared part of yourself, or becoming more mindful and beginning to treat yourself with a little more kindness over and over again, that will produce measurable structural changes. And so whatever we rehearse gets reinforced. And that works in both ways. So if you're rehearsing inner critic and I'm not good enough, that's what gets reinforced. And that inner critic's voice is pretty loud because it's been practiced for years. That's what's been trained in the mind. And so you can also practice this wiser, kinder voice that we all have. And it's really the part of us that can assess the actual reality we're in right now much more effectively than that smaller critical voice that we have that's really based in fear and outdated beliefs. So what can we do more concretely to work with this inner critic? A researcher named Kristen Neff has spent decades, along with Chris Gerber, studying what actually shifts this pattern. And what she found is that self-compassion is an excellent antidote to the inner critic. And this is a practice, and it actually helps to shift this pattern of self-criticism. And Kristen Neff has designed the framework around it. And so the first step really is mindfulness, becoming aware and noticing what is there, what thoughts are there, what body sensations, without being pulled in or carried away by them. So really just noticing, just seeing it. And then the second step is connecting to your common humanity. So recognizing that the shame, the not enoughness, it's not just yours alone, that we all experience these things as human beings. Even those people in the presentation that you gave, they have sat on their own sofa with their own fears or their own version of that voice. And the third step is self-kindness and turning towards that frightened part of you Just like you would turn towards a child who might be scared thinking that there's a monster under the bed. And you wouldn't go force them back to sleep and be like, hey kid, tough cookies, go back to sleep. You would sit with them, you'd embrace them, you'd listen to them, you would acknowledge what they're feeling, no? And maybe tend to their needs. You take the fear seriously enough to maybe go look under the bed together or hug them or reassure them. And then there's also another step you could take, which is after you've listened to that voice and you've recognized those feelings as human and you've opened to being kind to them, you might show them the evidence. Sometimes what they're believing isn't true. Just like the monster under the bed, you would lift that bedspread and show them underneath the bed and say, see, it's not really a monster. So you let that wiser part of you, that adult or mature part, speak to them and not dismiss what they feel, but actually show them what is actually here right now and remind them that you are capable, that you can handle whatever might come your way, that even in the worst case scenario, I can show up for myself and I'll be fine. So the next time the critic speaks, try this sequence. So noticing first what is happening in the body, becoming aware. Maybe there's heaviness in the chest or the warmth in the torso. Before the words, there's some sensation usually in the body. So maybe start there and ask yourself, what is it saying? What is this voice saying to me? And let it speak. Listen to what it's saying without pushing it away or arguing. And maybe recognizing the emotions or feelings that are there, the shame or the feeling of not being enough. And reminding yourself that this isn't just you or it's not a failure, that this is just part of being a human being and all human beings feel this way. And then question those ideas and whatever's founded. Maybe make an agreement with that part of yourself to show up and do better next time or learn. And whatever's not valid, whatever's not true, then show them the evidence. Show them that you're capable now. Remind them that, that was then and this is now. That was when I was a child and I couldn't defend myself. Now I can. Or whatever you're afraid of isn't really necessarily going to happen. And I can show up for us if it does. And so that way, that part of you starts to carry a different narrative. And just one last thing, if you're trying this in a moment of activation, you might notice that those physical sensations are still running. Even the voice might be still there, but just remembering that the nervous system isn't like a switch that you can flip on and off. It's just a process. And so it might just need a little more time to come back to balance. And so you can just stay with it until it settles. Just, this is what's here right now. So that presentation is still there in the past. The sofa's still there. The voice is probably still running its debrief on full throttle. None of that really changes, but there is a difference between being caught up in it, being inside that voice, being controlled by it, versus observing it, noticing it, listening to it, and tending to it. One feels like a verdict, and the other feels like possibility, agency, resilience. And the more you can learn to tell them apart and practice that distinction and keep showing up for yourself, the less power that voice has. So in our next episode, we're going to stay with this, and we're going to look at what happens when that critical voice turns outward. So when it starts narrating not just what's wrong with you or with us, but what's wrong with everything around us, and what that costs us in places where we care about most. So I hope you'll join us. I'm Victoria Fontana. This is No User Manual, a podcast for life without instructions. Thank you so much for listening, and take good care.